Okay, our next question is from Michael on impaired nutrient absorption on one meal a day. Dear Rob and Nicki, first of all, thank you for the wonderful show and all of the work you've been doing. I have a question that has been on my mind for quite some time, and hopefully it will get answered on your podcast one day. I'm going to move this monitor so I can see this a little bit easier. Is there any reason to be concerned about limited nutrient absorption during a daily 24-hour intermittent fast? Personally, I find that the one meal per day approach works the best for me for many different reasons: body composition, logistics, mental clarity during the day, etc. But I wonder if there's any downside related to the maximum amount of nutrients, for example, protein, that the body is able to absorb and or utilize if all the nutrients, example, 4,000 calories worth, are consumed in one very big meal in the evening on a daily basis. For example, the popular belief is that the protein absorption is optimal with 30 grams of protein per serving, and therefore is it better to spread the daily intake of protein across smaller meals throughout the day? Does it also apply to vitamins and minerals? For example, I like to include nuts in my salads or add cocoa powder to my low-carb desserts. Both of these contain quite a lot of phytic acid, which, as we know, decreases the absorption of certain minerals, etc. I want to make sure that my body does not send most of the precious nutrients that I consume to the toilet without utilizing them. Do you think it would be reasonable to increase consumption of certain nutrients, like protein, beyond the recommended doses to compensate for the lower absorption? Many thanks in advance. Michael.
Man, there's a lot to unpack in there. Maybe first is that the notion that 30 grams of protein is somehow optimal. Usually it's couched as your body can't absorb more than 30 grams of protein at a sitting, which is ridiculous. You can actually process an enormous amount of protein at a given sitting, assuming normal digestive function, like bile salt release and stomach acid and all that type of stuff. And in fact, the flip side of this story is that if you want any type of anabolic signaling from branched chain amino acids, mainly leucine, you actually have to hit at least about 20, 21 grams of some sort of a well-formed protein, typically animal protein. It's hard to do with plant proteins. If you're doing something like a pea protein, if you're doing the vegan shtick, then you have to increase the protein amount by like 30 or 40% to get to the same degree of anabolic signaling, and it's still unclear whether or not it works as well. So I think that people are generally well suited to be able to hit all their nutrient needs with a one meal a day, so long as you feel okay with that. I would say that, like some of the work that Bill Lagakos does and some of the stuff that we see digging into circadian biology, it's probably not the most benign thing on our physiology to drop 4,000 calories in the evening without eating throughout the day. Like it's interesting because on the one hand, we don't necessarily want to do the grazing pattern. Like that clearly is not good for us. We've talked about this on other podcasts where they will look at folks doing same number of calories, isocaloric, even hypocaloric, where they're losing a little bit of weight, but eating, say, like 6 or 8 meals a day, ended up negating the anti-inflammatory properties of a reduced calorie diet. So normally if we just lose weight, we tend to see a reduction in inflammatory biomarkers, but just eating super frequently ends up being problematic. It doesn't necessarily mean that eating one meal a day is dramatically better versus like 2, kind of 2.5, like a big breakfast, maybe skip lunch, then have a modest dinner or something like that. It arguably might fit within our circadian biology more favorably. So long as you're eating nutrient-dense foods, like we're definitely going to have to rely heavily on protein sources, I would see the inclusion of things like greens being very minimal, or you would want to cook them, steam them, process them in some way. Like I would see it more kind of nutrient dense, but they take up a lot of space and they do compete in the digestive process. So I think you're just going to have, a lot of meat, a lot of protein, things like sweet potatoes that have color to them. Berries, nuts and seeds are good from both a calorie and a nutrient density standpoint. Any type of traditional preparation methods like soaking, sprouting, fermenting are probably good because it's going to aid in the digestive process. I probably wouldn't eat a ton of raw food under this circumstance because, again, it's other than maybe fruit, like I wouldn't do a giant raw salad in this case. I might even blanch the salad, or the way that you fix some of your salads where it's quite
Like olive oil
rich,
and vinegar,
like apple cider
vinegar
and,
dressing.
And Nikki will
Kind of
set
breaks
it
it
up,
down.
and she'll prep it several hours before dinner, and by the time we eat it, between the salt and the acid, like that stuff is really broken down quite nicely. It's really yummy. But I would just stack the deck towards that, improving the digestive process.
The only other thing is maybe making sure you're eating well in advance of your bedtime.
Yes, good point on the circadian biology piece, because we could be nutritionizing ourselves well, but then we could
You're eating
your
dinner at
circadian
7
biology.
p.m. and you're going to bed at 9 or 10. Like
That's going to be a problem,
especially
if it's
that
4,000
volume of
calories.
food. Yeah.
Yeah, good point.